All right, everyone. Well, it's 8:05, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And Paul, just making sure you're all good to go.
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. So I'm excited to have Paul Michael here, who is from Panacea Financial, a doctor-founded company, and specifically going to be talking about kind of starting your own practice in medicine and how logistically and from a business side you can kind of go for that, what options are available to you. And I was just kind of, mentioning off the cuff to you guys, this is something I don't know if it's crossed from a daydream to a fantasy yet, but I've been thinking more and more about in my own situation and sort of if this in the future may be the right move for me and how I would go about that. And it can really seem like a black box, um, even for someone like myself who kind of has a particular interest in the business of medicine. So I'm really excited to have Paul and his expertise here to share with us. And with that, Paul, I'll kind of turn the mic over to you, and we'll go from there. And certainly, anyone, if you have questions as they come up, feel free to put your virtual hand up to unmute yourself and ask or put it into the chat. And we'll also have time for a Q&A at the end as well, as I know there's always a lot of questions on this topic. So yeah, Paul, thanks for being here, and I'll let you take it over.
Yeah, and just so you know, I'm having a quick challenge here with opening my PowerPoint. If you just give me one more minute, this is
Oh
in
yeah, yeah. No,
technology fashion. I think we all know.
oh yeah. No, I've
Now,
been there. No, no problem at all. And if you need me to pull it up, you just let me know.
yeah,
Uh,
if you have the most recent one that Alex sent, that'd actually be perfect. And that way,
yes,
that
I can do that, no problem. Yeah, I told you the thing's never open when you want it to, and
yeah, it's of course in true technology fashion. I'm having that challenge right this moment.
no problem at all. All right, it's just pulling up on mine, so it'll just be a minute.
Yeah,
But yeah, maybe
yeah,
Paul, as it's kind of loading up, you can give sort of
yeah,
a brief background of yourself
yeah.
and how you came to join Panacea and about Panacea itself and what Michael, who is a physician, has kind of built.
Yeah. So I like to start out with hello, everyone. I am indeed a senior commercial lender. I've been doing this for 23 years, and I'm actually the banker with all first names. It's even worse. Not only am I Paul Michael, my middle name is Edward. So um, in my 23 years, I've actually seen quite a lot. So I've worked with medical and business professionals, but over the last decade, I have been exclusively working with just medical professionals. So if you think about it from a standpoint of, hey, what are all the different things that I can experience as a business owner, right? So you're either going to acquire or start your own business. And then from there, you have the option to purchase real estate. We can just go right into presentation mode. Yeah, perfect. So if you think about it, right, you're a business owner, you can even either begin your own practice or acquire it, and then you can purchase the building. You can maybe even acquire multiple separate practices. And then from there, the real estate also, you can do exclusive build outs and so much more. But then later on in the cycle, in your life cycle of your business, you can bring in a partner. And so there's just so many different dynamics. But just so you all know, Panacea Financial is a bank that was actually created by doctors for doctors. So our co-founders, Dr. Michael Jerkins and Ned Palmer, they were going through residency and they were looking for lending. They were simply looking for personal loans for some simple needs, and they found it really difficult. And they said, we should open a bank one day. And that's exactly what they did. So we started out just providing refinancing of student loans and personal loans. And now here we are 6 years later, over 6,000 clients nationwide, over $500 million in lending and deposits. And we're literally just making it happen. So just so you know, this is all I do every single day. I work with doctors, dentists, veterinarians, everyone in different affiliated fields. And I'm just really doing a lot of amazing things. So let me give you some ideas of some things that I'm doing recently right now. I have two clients who actually started their very own children's dentistry practice, and they bought both the building and did a startup loan. So that was about a $1.5 million project. I have a plastic surgeon who's buying a practice and building here at the end of the month. An existing plastic surgery practice that's been around for over 25 years. I have clients that are also just, they're acquiring multiple practices and building a MSO, DSO kind of entity. So what we're going to talk about today, though, is all about just becoming a practice owner in 2025. I'm sure you guys have a lot of different things to think about. And you know what's crazy is just from the time that I created this slide, we now have new economic factors that we didn't even have not even a couple months ago. So now we have tariffs and items cost more, which is affecting construction budgets and people who are building their practice from scratch. We have student loan volatility. People just like yourself, medical professionals who are in the pay and repay program have suddenly found that to maybe be in question, and there's change coming. So I'm going to go through and just talk about being a practice owner, the pros and cons, pluses and minuses. I'm sure there'll be lots of questions at the end, but if Jordan, we can go to the next slide, we'll jump right in. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about analyzing the costs of starting or acquiring your own practice. There's other things we'll talk about maybe in different times, like how to develop a realistic budget, identifying financing options for practice ownership, and more. Our screen has gone. Yeah, okay, so next slide, please. So we're going to talk about practice ownership paths. We're going to talk about buy-in, private versus corporate, what you can expect, what you can see. We're going to talk about how you prepare yourself financially. We're going to talk about understanding financing options, and at the end, we'll certainly have questions as well. So with the next slide here, practice ownership paths. Let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about this. Okay, starting a practice. One of the best things that you can do if you start your own practice is that you can do everything on your own. You can choose a lot of different options here, a lot of different paths, but I'm going to talk about starting a practice, pros and cons. So let's talk about pros, your cost and loan amounts. So practice prices right now are higher due to demand and corporate pressure. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. You have DSOs, MSOs, you even have companies that are buying veterinary practices. It can make it expensive. So starting your own can be one that can keep your costs lower. Benefit of that, though, if you start your own, you got the brand new technology. Everyone knows what that's like. Technology is constantly evolving. So having the top of the line everything is a really great way to start. Staff, you can hire who you'd like. It's all about your vision, people you work with and know in the community, and then also depreciation. When you buy new equipment, you can depreciate it and then lower your taxable income. You're also going to have your startup costs that you can write off, your interest expenses. And then with space availability, finding your own space, having something custom built, you got a lot of different options. So a lot of people, they'll look and see what's out there. They'll see high prices and they're like, you know what? I'm just going to start my own. And that's a good option. But here's your cons. Basically, construction in different markets, depending on whether or not you're doing gray shell to permanent. So let's say, I'm sure you guys have driven by before with different offices, and you'll see that they're built out. So they have like basic frames and they have like gray concrete. Building that out can be 100 to 300 square feet plus. Some medical practices might even have an ambulatory surgical center or exam rooms or more. So the cost can really vary. But then also, of course, when you start your own practice, you don't have a patient base. So it's going to be very determinant on you making sure you have the referral sources and the referral network. Because if you're building a referral network from scratch, that can be really challenging. And then your cash flow. A lot of times medical businesses, it can be 12 to 18 months plus or minus until you're at a break-even point or even profitable. And again, all those factors as far as cost, your patient base, referral network, planning that out, it can all be determined on how cash flow looks. But then also, if you're going to do that, you are probably going to want to have associating income. So the practice can't support you and your family alone initially. So continuing to earn wages outside the practice is key. And that'll be key for any bank. So talking on the next slide here, let's talk about case studies and pitfalls, things that we've seen here. And I want to share this. When you're going to start your own practice, having the proper market research and demographics is key. If you don't have that information that's available, you can build an area that's oversaturated, or doesn't have the demographic that you're looking for. So the worst thing you could do is, say you're going to start a pediatric practice, right? And you go and build an area that doesn't have multifamily households with children or disposable income. That can be a huge pitfall. Or having an area that's really saturated with the same thing that you provide, not being able to be seen. But also, again, referral networks. If you don't have the proper referral networks and the right people to refer to you, it can be really hard. And then the marketing. You guys all know the saying, right? Out of sight, out of thought, out of mind. Man, I've seen people open and I'll immediately go to look online and there's no website. I go to Google Maps to go look. There's not even a picture of the business, yet alone a link to a website. Maybe the wrong number. So announcing your presence, letting people know that you're coming is huge. And then branding. I'm sure we can all think of different branding and people who have done a good job and a bad job. We can all think of, you think of branding, you probably in your mind's eye, you can see Apple or Nike, the image comes to mind, the slogan comes to mind. So how you brand, how you market, all of that working together is key. And then with business plan, you got to have ramping up. You're going to have, both consults, people who are just going to talk, and then new clients who are starting, and then recall, people who are going to come in for multiple. So you have to factor and plan that. And then also, are you going to accept insurance or not? I will tell you the one thing I've seen, I had someone who opened their business and they were doing their credentialing for insurance for almost 3 months. And at the very end, it found out that their address was off by one office suite, and it took 2 months to amend and change. The dumbest things happen. So having all these things set up, pros and cons, goods and bad, project management. Let's talk about the size of the space and cost of construction. You're going to need to have a contractor who has experience in medical build-outs. You need the clinical equipment. You need the furniture, fixture, and equipment. So there's clinical equipment, right, for medical procedures. There's also furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And then your startup soft costs like working capital to pay payroll and marketing and utilities and to buy supplies. So all of these things are huge pitfalls and things that you need to understand. Just so you know, after 23 years, I do consider myself a subject matter expert. I have many different clients and resources. Helping someone plan a startup practice is second nature for me. So if and when you want to do this, you or a colleague or someone else who needs help, you can call. I have checklists, referrals for days. It really becomes a stress-free process. So the next slide here. I want to show you guys a sample budget. And this really helps elucidate all the different things that come into it and come into play. So of course, on the left, you have your hard costs, right? So your equipment, clinical equipment, office furniture and equipment, computers. But then look at the right, look at the soft costs. So you're actually going to have the construction cost, the cost to build a building, construction contingency. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a practice be built and someone looks at the toilet and they go, that toilet can't go there. We got to move that across the room. And you got to go and rip up all the plumbing, change it, move it. So you have contingencies. You have attorney and consulting fees, design fees, office lease acquisition costs. So getting something assigned to you to be able to be there and build. And my favorite, signage. I don't know if you know this or not, but you have to have a sign that shows people where your business is. I have seen people build beautiful $1 million businesses and forget the signage. So just all the little things, right? The software, the permits and fees, initial supplies. I've had people forget supplies before in their budget. The marketing, all of these things come into account. This is actually, just so you know, from one of our worksheets that we provide our clients. So we go through it, and there's a lot of additional things that I ask on top of this and things that you would never think of. So in this illustration here, someone actually doing a project startup and the total equipment, so hard cost, soft cost, everything, we're talking about almost $1 million project. So this is what it would probably look like for someone to open a plastic surgery practice or a dental office or even a medical office, maybe with an ASC or even a more minor one. So next slide, please. So let's talk about acquiring a practice. We already talked about starting a practice, the pros and cons. Now let's talk about acquiring. Starting up a practice has the highest risk, right? Because you have to plan everything from scratch. You don't have a patient base. If you don't plan, you can fail really hard. So acquiring a practice has a lot less risk. So pros and cons. Pros, you got immediate cash flow. You have a facility and real estate. You have the equipment and technology. The staff comes with it. You got a patient base, the branding, marketing, referral network. It's all there. So literally all you have to do is come in, smile, let everyone know, hey, it's business as usual, and it's typically just off to the races. I have some funny stories from this of little funny mistakes that clients have made along the way. Don't tell everyone if you buy a practice that you're maybe going to renegotiate their contracts. That's a bad idea. Don't go and cancel lunches. Don't cancel people's 401ks. I've seen people do a lot of weird things that they thought were discretionary, and it really is the heart and soul, right? A great 401k and investments and retirement income, free lunch, and just a happy owner, it goes a long way. So those are the pros. You buy a practice, you're off to the races, typically doing very well. Here's the cons. Practice prices right now are higher due to demand and corporate pressure. I have individual doctors and dentists and other people who are competing with DSOs and MSOs in the veterinary world. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Mars, the actual candy and food company, has a huge veterinary organization where they're buying up practices. They've been doing it for years. So there's a lot of corporate pressure and a lot of people are trying to compete with them. But again, cons also of buying an existing practice. You might have old technology and upgrades. You buy someone who's had a practice for 30 years and medium oak cabinets and carpet are an acceptable decor, but you have to buy it and redo it right away. And you'll see x-ray machines with actual film. I've seen it all. Staff might be overpaid. I've seen this a lot where people come in and they're like, there's just one person who makes like 40% more and I have to let go of them. But you need to know these things ahead of time. Personality clashes, old habits, ways of doing things. People don't like the new owner. Inherited issues. It can be a patient-based issue, referral network issues, maybe a bad reputation. Maybe the clinical treatment is up to par. Or also, you might have seller carry financing and performance transitions that you need to manage. I will tell you, though, having a transition plan is key for protecting the value. If you buy a practice, you don't want to suddenly slap your name on the door and get rid of the seller. That's a bad transition plan. So, for example, if you buy a practice, you might want to start with just putting your name underneath theirs on the door. And then they introduce you to all the new clients saying, hey, this is my associate. You don't even have to let them, no one has to know that they bought the practice. And then you just go from there slowly over time. But value comes in the client base continuing to buy, the goodwill, the value of any practice is the patient base and someone just business and routine and rescheduling. So the recall, all that. So next slide. I want to talk about case studies and pitfalls and talking about some different examples, right? So you have a business. Let's look at this practice example. You have a practice that does 1.4 million in annual collections. And then you basically look at the income that's available. So SDE, by the way, stands for seller discretionary earnings. So if you're looking at financials, how much do they pay themselves as a W-2? How much do they take in distributions? What are maybe some write-offs that they have that are basically lowering their taxable income. But if they didn't have that, they'd be drawing more. So you have a business here that has 550,000 in SDE, and they're asking, for 1.2 million. And then they also, maybe the real estate's up for sale. Basically had a situation just like this where looking at the practice initially, everything looked really great. But then with the real estate, it turns out that they had a lease and the lease only had a couple years left. And on top of that, it turns out that the owner basically was not planning to renew the lease. So this person went to go buy a practice, got everything all done and approved, and was moving towards the final countdown to close. They're trying to negotiate the lease, and the seller conveniently forgot to tell the buyer. And had that not been caught or someone missed that, imagine buying a practice for, 1.2 million, and it has all this profit, and then you get a move out notice. That can be pretty scary. So here's another, have a loan details, have a practice here. It was a $1.35 million loan, and they also wanted 150,000 in working capital to buy a practice. So they were looking at about 140,000 a year of what their loan payments were going to be. The real estate, they had an option to buy for, basically they could finance about 80 to 85%. And they also had an option to put down maybe 15 or 20%. So I want to sort of tie into this and sort of show like how all this would look as like a collective. So looking at this here, if you have the option for real estate, it can protect your value. It's an asset that you can build over time. It's a great retirement piece. But of course, if you're going to be coming up with a down payment, that can also be an issue. How are you going to do that? One neat thing that we're able to do at our bank, if someone wants to buy a practice, if they're also selling the real estate, in some cases, we can actually provide 100% financing. So just so you know, that's something neat that we can do. And sometimes a practice is being sold for less than what we perceive it to be worth. But looking at this whole entire package, right? If you're buying a practice, you have the option to buy a building. You basically have these loans to consider. There's some different pitfalls here that you want to think about. We have seen businesses before where, hey, it looks really healthy. You'll have 1.4 million annual collections, 550,000 in seller discretionary earning. They can buy a building. But then you go to do the due diligence financially, and you find out that they have an issue with accounts receivable. We've actually seen practices before where someone had a practice manager, they're doing all the billing, and then they suddenly just got behind, never did all the updated codes, and then left. And then you would go into the practice thing and you have accounts receivable and everything's healthy and you have a huge backlog, and a lot of the AR is not even valid anymore because it hasn't been billed. Also, some practices, they've got their referral sources. So you can have a practice like this that looks really good. You can buy the real estate, you can buy the building, but the referral sources are burnt out and there's no goodwill. And even if you take ownership, they're maybe not going to refer to you anymore. But again, the transition plan with the seller is important, continued marketing, new starts. There's a lot of different things here to consider. But this is like, just look at this right here on this whole. This can be a scenario where you have the opportunity to buy the practice and buy the building. It all looks really healthy. You maybe have the option to buy the real estate, but they can have these issues here that you find out later. So doing your due diligence, having the right team, this is where someone like me here at Panacea comes into play. I can get the financials and look at issues with ARs. Excuse me. We can also see with their actual software who their referral sources are and how often they're referring. We can go back years and see if they've had an issue or maybe a falling off. We can talk about a transition plan, protect goodwill. That's good to have a bank. A lot of banks will go and just give you an approval and they don't even worry about these kind of things. But all these different things are so important. And next slide. So let's talk about partnering in a practice. We're almost done here. Partnering is something that you can do as well. So this is actually the least amount of all your risk. So starting up has the highest risk. Acquisition is the least or the second less. Partnering with someone is a great way to come into a practice, get to know the lay of the land, not take on the risk of full ownership because you gain revenue from all the ownership of the practice revenues. You're going to have shared management duties. You'll get to spend time with patient care. You'll have mentors to guide you. You'll get to see the systems and processes that are already in place. And if you're already an associate, you have intimate knowledge of the staff and operations. And then the tax benefits. The practice owner discretionary expenses can now be reviewed for reduced tax liabilities, and you get to share in that. But of course, the cons of being in a partnership. Have you guys ever heard the saying, the one ship that sinks often is a partnership? That can happen. So if you're looking at the cons of a partnership, lack of control in the practice, if you're sort of in a legal marriage with the partners, you're inheriting any issues or maybe risk, maybe lawsuits. You could be at risk if the producers leave or slow down and, share the profit and cash flow might not be as much as you thought. So again, least risk, most risk, covering all these different examples. Next slide. I'm going to skip this here. I mean, this is going to be talking about buying into a practice and just an example here. I'll jump into it really quick. This is, for example, a business that has $7 million in annual revenue, 1.1 in net profit. Valuation says it's worth 6.5 million and they're offering 10%. So we do something called a minority partner buy-in, where you can buy in and with just your personal guarantee, you can have a share of the income, but you'd have 105,000 a year in debt service on a 10-year loan. So the benefit to this, the economic benefit is that you'll receive a share of the revenue. The buy-in agreements and terms, you have to watch out for those and make sure that the language is correct to share the income with you. You might have expanded duties that you didn't expect, so you have to really read through the buy-in, and you might not have voting or membership interest, so other people can make decisions for you and drag you along. So this is something that you could do. This is an example of a minority partner buy-in. This could be a practice. This could be this could be a GI practice or a dental practice with multiple locations. You have your pros and cons. So transition or retention, looking at the different issues and risk here. There's a lot of things to consider. So moving on, let's talk about private versus corporate. So if you're buying into a corporate practice, it's the most passive way in ownership to gain revenue. Minimal management duties. You have systems and processes in place. Again, the tax benefits. But of course, the cons, again, you're going to have minimal ownership. You're in a legal marriage. You get dragged along with different issues, inherit problems. So again, you're buying into a corporate practice or a minority practice ownership, you're going to have the same kind of pros and cons. Great revenue, immediate resources, but you're going to share in the risk and things can change without your knowledge or vote. So moving on. Okay, so preparing financially. There's lots of different loans that you can do. There's SBA loans, there's conventional loans, there's specialized loans. Just so you know, I can help with all of these. There are pros and cons to these, and I don't want to go and load you down with a bunch of different information here. But I can tell you, SBA loans have a little more paperwork, but they have greater range, and they can be a really great strategic loan for buying a practice and building. For example, if you buy a practice in the building, you do an SBA loan, you can put them together and you can have the loan spread out over 25 years. But if you do a business loan by itself to buy a practice, so you're not buying the building, basically you can do, up to 15 years if you're buying a practice outright, or a minority partner, 7 to 10 years. So again, there's pros and cons, collateral, ownership, liability. There's a lot of different options here, but you might find yourself in a situation in the future where you want to acquire a practice, start your own, or minority partner buy-in. The neat thing is we have all the options you see here. We do it all, and we make it very fast. We're very precise and to the point. We're here to guide you. So Um, I want to talk about lots of common mistakes that doctors make: a lack of financial preparation or poor understanding of purchase terms. You need a team. So you're going to have financial due diligence. You need to have someone, a financial advisor, to help you with pre-tax planning and how you're going to structure it for ownership. You need a CPA to look through the financials. You need an attorney to make sure the paperwork and everything you're signing is correct and what you expect. So I can tell you the one saying that all of this sort of helps: inspect. If you don't remember anything, inspect what you expect. There's lots of professionals here. And then, of course, the person who makes it all come together and make sure that everything works is me. So definitely want to make sure you plan. Um, Now, a lot of different things here, and I'm just going to be very, there's a lot of information here. So I'm going to say this. If you get out of school and you're in your first job and you're making money, a lot of people, if they know they want to buy a practice in the future, they're going to be very careful about the home that they buy and how much they spend, the automobile, luxury items, secondary items. So a lot of people, they'll get in their first job in the first couple of years to buy a big house, a big car, maybe a boat or a second home, and they don't keep a lot of liquidity and they go to buy a practice. And the issue is they have low liquidity. They maybe have a lower credit score. There's a lot of different issues. So if you are planning to buy a practice and you want to talk about that now, connect with me afterwards and we can talk about this. But also your experience and background, being able to show that you know what you're doing, having at least maybe 2 years of practice experience, maybe some management experience. Um, are you able to get reports on your production and show what you can do? These are all things that banks are going to look for. So remember, if you're going to buy a practice, save your cash. Please don't go buy the most expensive boat and car and do a Ferrari loan or anything else like that. It'll just hurt you when you go to go and uh, buy a practice. So going on the next slide here. That is it. So this is what we've covered. We've talked about types of practice ownership, what you can do, whether it be a startup, an acquisition, a partner buy-in to a small business or a large corporation, talking about different types of loans, things to consider here, how to prepare yourself before you go and buy a practice. It's a lot of different information. I'm sure a lot of you might have questions, things that you're wondering, maybe scenarios. I'm open for any and all questions you may have.
Yeah, no, Paul, that was fantastic. Like an excellent run through. I know I learned a ton, and even again, just thinking hypothetically, going over, everyone's own situation, it's helpful to have all that information. Um, the first thing I wanted to ask you, and everyone feel free to throw some questions in the chat if you want to, again, raise your virtual hand. Um, but a lot of times what I'll hear people we're thinking of doing this. One of their biggest concerns is how do I develop a business plan and how accurate does this have to be? And feeling like, well, what if it's off by a little bit and I'm presenting it to the lender and these kind of things. How do you guys look at that, or how do you kind of counsel people in doing that?
Okay. So I have a great outline for a business plan that I can share with everyone, and it's just an outline. But the cool thing is, speaking of technology and being where we are today, there are amazing tools and resources that you can search out, and they can assist you. I have someone who literally is starting ortho practice, and they were looking for examples of a business plan. And so they took the outline of a business plan. They actually went to Chat GPT and said, "Hey, I'm designing a business plan. I want to develop all these resources. Here's my name. Here's my address. Here's what I want to do." And it actually gave them a starting point. So to stop and think about, hey, how much staff do you need for ortho? Do you need a dental assistant or just a straight up assistant? Do you need an office manager or just front desk staff? What are the hours that we're open? Do we need an HR handbook? So that's a great tool. But someone like myself, if I'm actually working with someone for a business plan, we have working models that we can give someone. But the biggest thing that we're looking for, and if you don't hear anything on a startup plan, hear this: your demographics and your fee schedule that you use for your financial projections are key. So we want to know that the area that you're building in has the right demographics to support you. We want to know about your referral network. We want you to elucidate and outline what that is. Who's going to refer to you? How often? Do you work with them already? Have they committed to referring to you? Do they know who you are? Um, the fee schedule. So people give you financial projections all the time and they don't have any fee schedule. So they're like, I'm going to make $1 million. I'm like, okay, what type of procedures? How often? Are they going to be new clients or returning clients? Like, I need to know. So, and there's amazing tools that can help you to outline your day. So, if you know, hey, I'm going to see 20 patients a day, and 5 of those are going to be recall, 15 are going to be new. Out of that, so many people are all going to get charged an office visit of $150, right? So 150 times 10 is 1,500 times 2, that's 3 grand. 5 of these will require this procedure or this diagnostic, which is this much, this procedure, which is this much. Then month 2, month 3, I'm going to see 25 clients, 30 clients. This is recall. So just showing intelligence that someone can pick up and follow and very quickly go, oh, I see how they're going to do it. This is their fee schedule. This is what they're doing. This is their plan. This is their demographic. Great question.
Super helpful. Andre has a question. Do you see physicians buying practices outside of their specialty? So I guess that would be almost more so as an investment kind of thing that they're then running it.
Okay. Well, I have seen, just so you know, I have personally done loans for orthodontists who have bought children's dentistry. So all orthodontists are actually dentists. So they can do all the procedures. They just won't do anything specialty on the child. They refer to a pediatric. So in that regard, an oral surgeon buying an endo practice, that makes sense all day long. But a dentist buying an MD practice or an MD buying a dentist, we don't do that here. So at our bank, we want the owner of a dental practice to be a dentist. Even if they're buying 1, 2, 5, 10 locations, which we can do, we're going to want them to be a dentist in their field that they're buying. But is it possible? Have I seen it? Absolutely. I've actually did a loan before at a previous financial institution for a doctor who bought a compounding pharmacy, and it was a great fit, especially because they did hormone replacement therapy. So it does happen. There are SBA solutions for that. That's actually a really great question, though.
Awesome. Stephen has one. Any tips on modeling anticipated revenue in a medical practice? You talked a little bit about this. Any other tips or kind of
Um,
tricks?
yes, yes. Get a calendar of the practice that you're looking at, and then get a copy of the fee schedule. And then look at the procedures and the frequency in which they occur. I'll use an OBGYN, for example. I have someone who's doing a startup OBGYN, and not only are they doing births at the hospital, the local hospital where they have privileges, but they're also doing treatments and rejuvenations. And so what they did is they got a copy of the schedule where they worked at and saw the frequency of what patients were getting done and the procedure codes. So you're all familiar with procedure codes. You can get a copy of the procedure codes and get the fee schedule, and that's the best way to model it. So if you're starting out, of course, month 1, you're probably going to see 5 patients a day. You're all going to charge a general exam fee. One might have a more detailed exam. One might do an ultrasound. And so looking at your model and see, this is where the demographics come into key too, right? So if you have single family or multifamily households with young parents, that's an area you want to build in if you're an OBGYN. And so again, fee schedule, frequency, calendar, see what people get, and then model it from there. I can help with that too. So if you or anyone else you know needs help, have them link up with me, myself, and other experts. We can make that happen.
Awesome. And another question here. Can you explain EBITDA and what represents a good or strong EBITDA?
Yes. Okay. Just so you know, I'm going to talk nerdy banker talk. Okay. I'm going to talk about EBITDA. So just so you know, there's lots of EBITDAs. There's EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. Then there's EBITDA, which is the same thing but with taxes. Then there's EBITDAR, so it's earnings before interest, depreciation, amortization, and rent. So EBITDA is what banks use to calculate cash flow. I'm going to tell you a nerdy saying, and you guys will never forget this because it's really dumb. If the cash doesn't flow, loan doesn't go. Even when banks tell you that they're going to pre-approve you, that is a lie. So if banks are like, let me get your personal financial statement and your CV, I'm going to pre-approve you. They're just going to pull your credit, make sure you have a pulse, and make sure you have nothing bad on your credit report. If you buy a practice with zero net income, really high overhead expenses because a person can't control their costs, you will be declined even though you are pre-approved. So, EBITDA, not all businesses are built equally. Some have much more higher earnings before they write off interest expense, depreciation, which is a lost value on machinery and equipment, and amortization. Now, just so you all know, amortization is something that you can use to write off if you buy a business. It's a way of sort of like writing off. It's like I'd have to look up the definition. I can't even remember anymore, but earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization is also what banks refer to as seller discretionary earnings. So if you're looking at a tax return, you want to look at the net income and then you want to add back the earnings, right? The owner salary, the owner distribution, how much they took. And then you're going to add back interest because that's a write-off that they had. But if you own the business, you wouldn't necessarily have the same interest write-off. Depreciation is a written off value of lost value of equipment over time. That mitigates how much taxes they don't have to pay on earnings. So EBITDA is different. I wish I had a slide to show you an example. If you guys want to talk, and I can have a whole session on this, but here's the thing. You want a strong EBITDA on a business. So you want to look at net income. On the very bottom, net income page 1, you want to add back the owner's salary and distributions. You add back interest and depreciation. Depreciation is usually on the first page, and then second or third page, 179. Yes, we will do a session for sure. We can do this all day long. Good comment. But yeah, if you all, just so you know, I have clients all the time who call me and go, "Hey, Paul, I want you to tell me what the EBITDA and SDE is, and this is a good buy." And I'll get the financials. I'll do my own Excel sheet, and I'll send you it, and I'll be like, "Hey, let's talk about this. I see some pitfalls." And just so you know, just because you have a high EBITDA, I've seen practices that have great net income. I'm like, this is the best practice ever. I need to buy it. And then it turns out it's garbage. The reason they have a high net income is because all they do is see emergency cases. They have no calendar or recall. And the last time they audited their receivables, and there's, past fraud. I mean, I've seen things that I'm like, hey, this looks really good. Using dentistry term, it's a really nice looking veneer, but it's a rotten tooth. So come to me. I don't remember the saying, better call Paul. I want you guys to call me and email me, come to me. I'll do these calculations. And yes, so absolutely.
That's awesome. And I think you're showing exactly where the value of what you bring comes in,
Yes. And this is the
identifying those potential issues.
big takeaway. Big banks will just dish out approvals and they're never going to check to make sure and see if you inspected what you expect, to see if you've done due diligence on the practice. Because again, I've seen great financials and they have no schedule, they have no recall. Everyone's about to quit. And if you don't do the right research, you can buy like a ticking time bomb.
Yeah.
So
How Robert's asking, how do you perform a demographic study? Where do you start?
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great question and free tools just to start. You can actually go to a Census Bureau and you can look up the city, state, and zip code. and they have really cool reports to talk about household demographic, family earnings, income. But there's a lot, I'll tell you. We are in an incredible day and age where the report and the information that can be pulled is phenomenal. If Amazon can ship products in their cars and they know that if they put it at a certain price, 80% of people in the area are going to buy it, and they print a label in the cars they're driving around, that same information is available with professional marketing companies. And so I have a ton of those, but they'll tell you, I mean, you ever heard the saying, all that in a bag of chips? I could literally tell you some of these demographics will drill down and tell you like how many bag of chips someone bought at the local supermarket in the last 6 months. I mean, it's insane. But if you want to know, hey, am I building in a demographic with families with two or more children, ages 2 through 12, for my pediatric practice with disposable incomes and private insurance? And what's the ratio? And what's the birth rate? That's huge information to know. And especially if the area is unsaturated and you can get a great location with street side view, that makes all the difference in the world. Some of these practices are selling, guys, because the demographics left. Like they are slowly dying and they don't know it's because their demographic moved.
Interesting. Stephen has another question. Wide range of loans available based on your slides. What would you say is the typical amount for starting out for a new practice that you see, say, for a subspecialist surgeon, he's asking?
Okay, for a subspecialist, so a surgeon, so a startup, what, like an orthopedic surgeon
Yeah,
or
let's
like
say
a
that.
plastic surgeon?
ENT, there you go.
Okay, perfect. ENT. So you're basically, here's a question. Would you want to have an ASC in your office to be able to do that, or would you want to have local privileges?
Let's see what Stephen comes back with.
Yeah, I was actually waiting for the comment here. Okay, not sure. Okay.
Let's say just the office.
Okay, so just the office, just medical exam rooms and everything else, furniture, fixture, equipment, signage, build out. The build out for a basic ENT, you're not having to do the same kind of build out like you would for an ASC or a dental practice. So you don't need the complicated plumbing or electrical or gas lines, right? So that'll be a lot less expensive. So maybe 100 to 200 per square foot for build out, maybe not even that. But a typical project cost for ENT, depending on the office and how many exam rooms and employees, maybe 500 to a million.
Oh.
But I will tell you all that are listening here, whatever bank you go with, you need to have a very healthy amount of working capital and a marketing budget. Half the calls I get every day are, I did a loan with fill in the blank, big bank, and I don't have enough working capital. Can you lend me some money? And I can't because the other bank's in first lien position. Some ASCs actually do have a specialized certificate that they need. It can be based on your local or county guidelines. So, like, you have a certificate of occupancy for like a normal building, but ASCs and ASCs might need specific ambulatory privileges and certain things that you're doing there, medical waste disposal. So, great question. And yes, I'm going to tell you guys all something else. If you're doing a startup and you're leasing or buying a building, you need to make sure you have the right professionals, like a real estate or someone like myself. Don't buy or lease a building and build it out and then find out you have no parking space.
That's a good tip.
I met a client who did that, and they were sorely disappointed to find out after they did their $600,000 tenant improvement project that no parking spaces were allocated, and it wasn't in the CC&Rs for a medical practice to even be there.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
You got
So,
to uncover every stone, like you said, inspect what you
yes,
expect. I'm actually going to borrow that phrase. Even for in medicine, that's very applicable.
especially
Um,
in medicine.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Diana has a good question here that I was actually going to ask as well. How do banks factor in student loan debt with these
Okay.
loans? Like, especially, let's say, if it is someone coming out of training or something like that, that hasn't really even had time to pay them off.
Great, great question. Some banks, okay, hear me out on this. Put on your ears here and hear this out because this is important. For probably, gosh, almost a decade, people have been on either pay or repay. So that's pay as you earn or the forget what the REPA, it's like something adjusted pay as you earn.
Hmm.
So typically student loans after a deferment period go on pay or repay, which is an income-based repayment plan. It's typically tied to 10% of your W-2 income and then an adjustment for the local poverty wage. So typically across the board, most and all doctors, their student loan repayment on pay or repay ends up being 8 to 10% of their W-2 income.
Hmm.
And then it's forgiven after what, 15 or 20 years based on the program that they're on.
Yeah. Usually, yeah, exactly.
IBR is the income-based repayment plan. And people who are high earners, so you surgeons out there, you oral surgeons, you orthodontists, you're making money hand over fist and you want to pay it off. Typically, an IBR, income-based repayment, is amortized over 15 or 20 years, and you're paying the whole thing off. Now, great question. Not all banks are created equal. Some banks will utilize what's on your pay or repay plan or IBR. Most big banks will just simply use a 15 or 20-year amortization at prime plus 2%. It's just a blanket calculation. And that isn't fair. So I've had clients that I've met where they're on pay and their payment for their $700,000 on student loans is $1,000 a month. And they come to me and they're like, hey, can you do the loan? I'm like, sure, yeah, great. SDE, your EBITDA, EBITDA is healthy, SDE is healthy, student loans are low, the cash flows, so the loan goes, right? It worked. But then other banks are like, no, 15, 20-year AM, 4,000 a month, that's 60 grand a year, and suddenly your cash flow doesn't work.
Hmm.
I can't tell you, this is the weird thing, and this is where we're just up in the air right now. Um, I don't know why we suddenly canceled these plans that were voted in with the House and Senate and Congress, and why we think that, these certain plans with more aggressive repayment are the way to go now. I can't speak to that. I don't know where it's going. But ironically, they're like, yeah, let's get rid of pay or repay. And then they're talking about an IBR that's then 25 or 30 years. So go figure. The repayment plan is going to be lower. But it's a good thing we got rid of that plan for 15 or 20 years because now we're introducing 25 to 30 years. So yeah, doctor, take that. I don't know what that's all about.
I
So
know.
that's a great question as well.
Awesome. And we have one more here before we wrap up. Looking into a practice buy-in, and I have some cash to do it.
Okay.
Do you suggest some tax benefits to a loan and paying it off quickly? So I guess paying in cash up front versus a loan and paying it off somewhat aggressively for some of the tax deductions.
I think I have lots of fun sayings here today. We can write them all down. So, inspect what you expect and all these other fun ones. But another one that I like is cash is king. Cash is definitely king. Someone who has enough liquidity to pay all their personal expenses for 2 years if they don't have a job is in a much better situation than someone spends a large sum of cash on a practice and then has a problem and then you're cash poor. And I don't know about you guys, but I caught COVID twice. One time I was out of work for 2, 3 weeks because it sucked. And then literally 2 months later, I totaled my car, total freak accident. And then like weird things happen, right? So it's like I've had doctors who have had their hands on the steering wheel and then suddenly it went off with the airbag and their hands are broken and they're out of work for 6 months. So all these things, I love this saying too, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. So if you have the option to buy a practice and do 100% financing, you might as well do that. Save your cash because, man, if you buy a practice and you get your permanent working capital and your loan and your credentialing for some reason is disrupted by 3 months, you still are responsible for payroll and rent and supplies. If some kind of business disruption happens, I've had people who have closed their practice on a Friday, come back on a Monday, and there's 3 inches of water in the whole entire practice. You're a miniature lake, your lake feature. It takes a while for that insurance to kick in, and bills are still due before business overhead or interruption insurance kicks in. So If you're buying a practice, I would recommend you keep your cash, finance 100%. And this is important. Choose a bank that doesn't limit you or penalize you for paying your loan down or off early.
Great point.
Some banks have a non-pay clause, and I'm not joking or exaggerating or even kidding. They have 2-year non-pay clauses. So even if you're dying of cancer, sorry, can't pay off your loan. Hey, you broke your hands, you're permanently disabled, you have neuropathy in your shoulder or feet, you can't work. Sorry, can't sell your practice. Like, I'm not joking. Banks like ourselves, we only charge you a prepayment penalty if you pay off your loan by refinancing with another bank. But double, triple, quadruple payments are completely welcome. And you plan with your financial advisor to make sure that you have the best balance of write-off so you mitigate your taxes. That is a great question. These are great questions. Thank you, guys. I love these questions. I hope you all call me later when you're about to do something. The one who asked a question about the practice loan, give me a call later. Let's talk.
Awesome. Well, Paul, this was incredibly informative, incredibly practical and helpful advice. So I want to thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And also, I'll be sending an email with the recording to everyone, and I'll have your email in there. But just really quickly, in case some people are interested, could you just rattle off your contacts just so they know how to get in touch with you if they have some questions or are
Yes.
looking to do some of this on their end?
Yes. So just so you all know, my cell phone number, write this down. You can text me right now live. Send me a text, 623 340 2356. Again, 623 340 2356. I'll send you my contact, and you can, whenever you have an issue, you'll be like, better call Paul, and you'll already have my contact. One more time, 623 340 2356. And then my email, all first names, Paul period Michael at panaceafinancial.com. Just like you see here. I already got a text. So
There you go.
that's perfect. So yeah, I'm here. Call, text, email, whatever you need. I just want to stress this enough. My advice is free. I don't bill by the hour. I will go through everything that you can imagine. Give me a call, text, or email. You can talk to me. I will give you sound sage advice, and we'll go over all these pitfalls and things that you can easily avoid.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much, and thank you
Oh,
everyone for. Oh, do we have here?
good point. Why don't I use this amazing chat feature and type in my number?
Here I got. There's the email, and there's the number. Perfect. There you go. Um, Well, yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you everyone who joined for your time and questions and continued support. And we'll be linking up soon. I'm Paul, I'm sure of it.
Awesome.
All
Hey,
right.
guys, great questions.
Bye.
Appreciate you all. Hope to hear from you soon.
Have a great night, everyone.